Again, it's Matthew here from MatthewNorthMusic. Thank you for watching my channel, and as ever, if you find these videos are interesting, if you're interested in music, electronics, retro tech, anything like that, then please think about subscribing to the channel. It really does help. And if you click the little bell icon as well, then you'll be notified of the next video that's released. And as ever, these things are all completely free. There's no charge or anything. Just hit subscribe and there you go. So we are back in 1984. Sorry this video is a couple of weeks late coming out, but I've had quite a busy month. But I still wanted to get this done within the week of April to fit in with how things are. Now, this month's a little bit different in that there was less stuff I could find out about what was on music TV wise in this month. And also, it was a month where there wasn't a lot of big releases, but we had a lot coming very soon. But it was also a month where there were a lot of big hitters in the charts, and the charts was fairly solid for this month with, you know, hit after hit after hit that's come out in the previous 3 months, all still in the charts. But there will be one record that will smash through all of that next month, and you can probably guess what it is, but if not, then that'll be something for next month. Anyway, releases this month. Now, I'm going to kind of whiz through them because I do kind of think that these videos may be a little bit long, a little bit dull. And, you know, and there's stuff that's in the record mirrors in Smash Hits I want to talk about because there's, you know, some interesting stuff. But anyway, in this month, there was, you know, still a fair number of releases. I'm going to whiz through them. So in the first week, we had Phil Collins' Against All Odds. That was a big hit single. The Caterpillar by The Cure wasn't a massive hit, but I think it did still get top 15. Heaven by Psychedelic Furs, a perennial favourite. Novelty record, Eat It by Weird Al Yankovic, which I think was probably his biggest hit, even though it's not really a proper song, but it kind of is, if you know what I mean. Then Such a Shame by Talk Talk, wasn't a massive hit, but great song. Automatic by the Pointer Sisters, that was kind of their kind of return to popularity, really, with that one. And then I'm So Excited afterwards. Well, I think it was afterwards anyway. If not, it was the other way around. Either way, it was still a big hit. Liberator by Spear of Destiny, that's a favourite in this house. And then Beatbox by The Art of Noise came out in this week. Now, it entered the charts at number 92. It did get further up in the charts, but I think The Art of Noise were very much a slow burn. And Beatbox, I think, got more popular later on because it kind of appeared on the album, it appeared on the EP, and it also appeared on the B-side of Close to the Edit, which of course was the really big Art of Noise single from that kind of first wave of the band. Now, there's one album that came out in the first week, which was huge. It was massive, and I regard it as being one of the greatest albums of the 1980s, and I might be a bit Alan Partridge here in talking about it, but it's this. Now That's What I Call Music Too. Now, this album has a particular place in my heart because it was the first Now album I ever got. I actually got Now 1 on cassette afterwards, but I had Now 2 on record first. And I mean, you just look at the track listing on this. I mean, it kicks off with Radio Gaga by Queen, and it's followed by Wouldn't It Be Good by Nick Kershaw, then Hold Me Now by the Thompson Twins. It's got Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper, 99 Red Balloons by Nena. It's got Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax. It's got Here Comes the Rain Again by the Eurythmics. What Is Love by Howard Jones. What Difference Does It Make by the Smiths. Reflex Politics of Dancing, Thomas Dolby's Hyperactive. David Bowie's Modern Love. Culture Club's It's a Miracle. Rolling Stones Under Cover of the Night. Slade's Run Runaway. Jiran's New Moon on Monday, and then the Christmas '83 hit Pipes of Peace by Paul McCartney. Now, not all the songs on this are from '84, a lot from '83, but I've just read out some of them. There's other tracks as well, but this really was a game-changingly quality compilation album. And I think they did the first album, which was very successful, but then I think this cemented the brand, and then I think they knew from here on there that the Now series is going to be probably the greatest collection of compilations ever made. And 41 years on from when it first came out, I'd say it is the greatest series of pop compilations ever made. And it's still relevant today, because one of the things about buying a Now album now, say on CD, it's the only way you can get the hits of the day in an uncompressed quality format. Because even if you buy an MP3 or an iTunes download, it's compressed audio. It's it's got bits missing. But if you want it in full quality, then you got to get it on a CD or a lossless download. And lossless downloads are quite expensive. But if you can buy a Now album for 10 quid and it's got 30 tracks on it, then you've already saved a tenner rather than paying £1 each for them as a download. And you've got it in a quality format that will last forever. So, we all love the Now albums, and that's kind of where it really sort of got the ball rolling. Anyway, in the next week, we had some more really big hit songs. We had I Want to Break Free by Queen. We had Locomotion by OMD. We had Don't Tell Me by Blancmange. Dancing Girls by Nick Kershaw. There was I think it was a Eurovision song called Love Games by Bella and the Devotions. That came out in this week, and that went on to be a fairly big hit. A couple of albums that also came out this week was Lament by Ultravox and Victims of Circumstance by the ever-perennial Barclay James Harvest, who seemed to do quite well in this year. Now, the following week, again, we got a load of other, great tunes. Footloose by Kenny Loggins, that entered the charts at 99. We had Small Town Creed by the Kane Gang, that entered the charts at 86. That's a great song. Very underrated band, the Kane Gang. If you ever get a chance to listen to the Bad and Low Down World of the Kane Gang, it's an absolutely excellent record. Billy Joel's The Longest Time came out this week, entered the charts at 81. And then Sandy Shaw and the Smiths. Now that's an interesting record. This entered the charts at 44. And it was a 3-track, if you bought a 12-inch, a 3-track EP. Hand in Glove was the main track, but Johnny Marr, Andy Rourke and Mike Joyce were the backing band on that record, and that really was the sort of the comeback of Sandy Shaw, was by doing this record with the Smiths. And part of the reason they did it is because Morrissey and Marr always had the intention of writing songs for other people, and Sandy Shaw was the first person they got to record their songs, and it's a great record. If you've not heard it, go and listen to it. It's great. Now, another couple of records that came out in this week were Silverback and the Bunnymen, and this, which is One Love by Bob Marley and the Wailers. Now, this was a massive song, and it came out the following month, but the album this was from, which was the compilation album Legend, I think it's safe to say is probably the biggest compilation album ever. I mean, it's sold millions and it still sells loads, and it is a perfect compilation album. There's no question about it. I'm going to talk more about that for the next month's episode. But what's really interesting about this record is that when an artist passes away, generally record companies will just churn out a greatest hits album or a tribute album. They'll re-release a few singles as a cheap cash-in. And what they did with the Wailers was something much more special. And what they did was they took the songs that they wanted to put on the compilation and to release as singles, but they worked on them. They kind of modernised them. And that's not something that you would necessarily want, and you certainly wouldn't want it now with some of the sort of classic artists of the past. But with this, using people like Julian Mendelssohn, who remixed One Love, it just had a slightly more modern sound, and it for the time it just worked perfectly. I mean, when this came out, it was just such a classic. It was an instant classic, and to people like me, I didn't really know Bob Marley's work until this came out, and then the follow-up single, which I think was Waiting in Vain, and then I think they did Could You Be Loved, and they were all brilliant. And as I said, the Legend album, which was basically a collection of songs where the majority had kind of been remixed. I think might have done a few overdubs as well, possibly on some of the tracks, but they were sort of freshened up versions of the songs, and they have become the default now. I mean, if you were to listen to One Love by Bob Marley, it would be this version. This is the one that you would listen to. And the video of it was great as well. It had like tons of different people, you know, everyone from Paul McCartney, Musical Youth. Ziggy Marley was obviously the main character in the video. Just was a whole bunch of, you know, really famous people that were in that video. I think Don Letts directed it. Pretty sure it was Don Letts that directed that video, but it was a great video, great song from a great compilation album. Now, other releases that came out in this month, well, in the last week of the month, well, the big song was The Reflex by Jiran, the Nile Rodgers remix. Massive hit all over the place. New Order put out Thieves Like Us. Alvin Stardust, now, you know, name from the 70s, hadn't done a lot for a very long time. He had a hit in 81 with a song called Pretend, and then he did a ballad called Feel Like Buddy Holly, which was also another hit, and that came out this year. And Denise Williams' Let's Hear It For The Boy, that entered the charts at 85, but soon went up the charts, and yeah, another big hit. But Reflex was the big hit, that actually entered the charts at number 5. Now, as far as albums that came out in this week, the self-titled album from Bananarama came out. One Eye Jacks by Spear of Destiny came out. Really great record, that is. Dead or Alive Sophisticated Boom Boom came out, which was their album, which had That's the Way I Like It on. And that did pretty well. And another album that came out was the self-titled debut from Bon Jovi. But of course did absolutely nothing in the UK until 2 years later when they brought out Slippery When Wet, when that obviously became absolutely massive. And right at the end of the month, Pointer Sisters' Breakout album came out, which again, big hit album. And there was one single of note which entered the charts at number 19, and that was The Lebanon by Human League. So yeah, good selection of stuff that came out. There's one other album actually that came out earlier in the month, which was this one, which was Point of the Curve by Wang Chung. That came out. Again, it did pretty well, I think, but I think they did much better in the States than they did in the UK. But Dance All Days was definitely a big single of the time. So, a lot of releases there. As for things like TV, well, Whistle Test and Oxford Roadshow were both taking a break at the time, but there were a few other programmes which we'll go through. But let's have a look at some of the things that were in the music papers of that time. Being an avid Smash Hits fan, it was always great to see one of my favourite bands on the cover, and seeing the Thompson Twins on here was just fantastic. But the following issue, which we'll have a look at in a minute, I think that pretty much sums up the summer of 1984 quite clearly, because Frankie Goes to Hollywood were gearing up to release Two Tribes. They'd already appeared on television a couple of times doing other songs. They were on the Oxford Roadshow, but it was very soon that song was just going to take over the world. Now we can see from this spread that Jiran were on their US tour, and of course later in 1984 we got the Arena album and the Wild Boys single, but they were still touring the Seven and the Ragged Tiger album. So obviously a nice big feature on them, and obviously the single Reflex was going straight in the charts at 5, and it would be at number 1 the following week. Now this is quite interesting because they're doing an interview here with Peter Powell, who at the time was presenting the Oxford Roadshow as well as being a DJ on Radio 1. And what's quite interesting is it gives his date of birth here as being 1951. That would have made him 33 when he was presenting on Radio 1. And that really was considered as, you know, quite old at the time. And this bit I found quite interesting here. And it's the bit about his first concert, and it was Jimi Hendrix at the De Montfort Hall in Leicester when he was 16. Now, you got to remember that going from Jimi Hendrix to, you know, Howard Jones and Jiran, I mean, that's music that has gone through an awful lot of changes between seeing Jimi Hendrix to where they were now, because you've gone through so much disco, punk, the whole hippie thing, glam rock, the pub rock scene. So many different types of music have changed in those 16 years. And if you look now and you think back 16 years from now, what great changes have there been in music? And I can tell you, not very much. And if we look at the news section, which was always edited at the time by Neil Tennant, who went on to obviously be the Pet Shop Boys, there's a big feature here on Captain Sensible. There's a little line in here saying, "Wake Me Up Before You Go Go" is the title of Wham's new single, which will be released in May. Well, obviously that went on to be another massive song. And Martin Gore's favourite video games are in here. It's interesting, they've got a thing here about fan club addresses. And so here you can write to either the Thompson Twins TAA, which is run by my good friend Viv, or the UB40 fan club. So plenty of choice, you could say. And here it's announced that Van Halen will be playing the Donington Monsters of Rock Festival. And that was obviously an event that went on to become, you know, huge, because Van Halen did become one of the big rock bands in the world, and that performance kind of cemented their status. Well, in the album reviews section, not a huge number have been reviewed in this this copy, although it should be pointed out that they're not very happy with Roger Daltrey, referring to it as an out-of-touch collection of uninspired songs given an unconvincing performance and a pretentious cover. Grandad Roger gets a little help from the laid-back playing and production. Well, Grandad Roger was probably only about 35 at the time, or maybe he might have been getting towards 40. Now here's an interesting advert looking at some of the albums that they're selling off in WH Smith's. For £2.50 you could get many of the popular mid-price albums of the time: Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell, or The Cure's Boys Don't Cry compilation, Genesis's Nursery Crimes, or Hendrix's Smash Hits. You know, that's a good price. Even back then that was a good price for an album, because most full price albums were roughly about a £5. But even then, special offer £3.99, you've got stuff like Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, Heaven 17, Human League's Dare. I mean, the 3 Joy Division albums, Closer, Still and Unknown Pleasure, I mean, to get them for £3.99 is an absolute bargain, especially Still, because that was a double album. But over here, they got the video cassettes that have come out, and videos then were still £20 each. And it wouldn't be long before the Channel 5 label would come along, and they started issuing and reissuing videotapes at £9.99, and that, I think, really expanded the choice of videotapes, and more people started buying them. Now let's have a look at the singles review, and one that takes my eye is what was said by Tom Hibbert at the time about Queen's I Want to Break Free. And this is really a classic review when you think that I Want to Break Free was one of Queen's most memorable songs. And it says, "After the mastery pop construction of Radio Gaga comes a big fat dud, an unfinished song loosely borrowed from Shirley Bassey's ancient hit, What Now My Love, an absurd guitar solo seemingly based on the vocal techniques of Sweep from celebrated Glove Puppet, and a half-hearted performance from All Bar Freddy, and he's just wasting his breath." So yeah, not very popular review there, but obviously they were wrong, because that became, you know, huge. But you can see here, and it's quite interesting, there's a lot of names that kind of never really were heard of again. I mean, obviously the Cure get a good review, but Friends Again, Dolly Mixture, The Moodyists, Way of the West, Stephen Lawrence, Zach Zona, Electric's Banana, Jacko. I mean, these are all people I've certainly never heard of, and I certainly don't remember them at the time. But then, of course, you know, Talk Talk, OMD, our favourites here, Palace, you know, lots of good stuff there too. It's interesting, there's a feature here about Rockwell with his follow-up to Somebody's Watching Me, Obscene Phone Caller, did nothing, and was sadly never really heard of again. Now, I'm guessing that when they know who's going to be on the cover of the magazine, they kind of tell the advertisers, because it's an advert for Wrangler jeans, and they're making reference to the Thompson Twins in the advert, and I just can't see they would have done that if they had not known that the Twins were going to be on the cover of the magazine. Now, when I look at things like the Penpal section, I always wonder if some of these people are still around and at the same address. I mean, if I had actually written in this at the time, and put my home address at the time, then the letters would probably still get to me. But I quite like this one. Mad about Blancmange, the Smiths and the Thompson Twins. Tom Bailey lookalikes also welcome. Well, that kind of sums up my music taste really at the time. Now this is quite a cool competition to win. You could win a Sonny Walkman of varying types, and I think they're also giving away some CHF 90 cassettes, which something I'm very fond of. While we're talking about blank tapes of the era, this will always be my favourite cassette. There was just something so special about this era of the TDK D90. Everything I recorded was on one of these tapes, and in my collection I've got a few of these that have never been used, and I'm very, very fond of them, and I still sometimes buy second-hand ones of these that are nice and clean, and they're the cassettes I generally use when I want to record something, just because I just love that whole nostalgic factor. But the Sony one, there was always something very elegant about these cassettes, and I think that's why these are actually quite collectible now, because there's far less of them around, and this is the only one I have a sealed example of. But I always thought these were very, very sort of smart as well, but they were always a little bit more expensive than the TDKs. You could buy a 5-pack of these for £4.99, but it would usually be £1 more if you wanted to get the Sony ones. Now there's a nice feature here about what's happening in the live world, and Starlight Express was a new musical that was taking place in London, and I was actually supposed to go and see that on a school trip, but then it didn't actually happen. But one of my bandmates in the Mike Westbrook band, Graham Russell, he's one of the trumpet players in it. But there's a review of Nick Kershaw in Ipswich and Howard Jones in Sheffield. And if we look at some of the bands that they're talking about going on tour, you've got Bucks Fizz doing quite a big tour. A lot of big venues, you know, Bournemouth, Winter Gardens, Cardiff, St David's Hall, all sort of nice places. And if you look at the other tour dates, they all seem to be playing similar places. Dead or Alive, Gene Loves Jezebel, the Lotus Eaters, Nick Kershaw, and Stevie Wonder. And Yes are playing Wembley Arena on July the 11th. And of course that was the 90125 tour. Now, of course, as I mentioned last week, you know, Roland Rat was one of the great names of 1984, and to have a full-page advert in the magazine must have meant that they were hoping that they would shift some more of his style of music, although they obviously didn't have the budget to have a colour-printed advert. And I guess this is the main course about this issue, because obviously the Twins were on the cover, and there's a feature here about the Thompson Twins going on tour, because they'd obviously done a big world tour in '84, because Into the Gap was just huge. And you've got all the sort of the management and the crew in the background, and then you've got the touring band here. There's Roger there, my mate, Boris Williams, Stephen Hayward Chaplin, the bass player, and there's the main three there. And I think one of those two is the other keyboard player. I think she was called Jane, I can't remember off the top of my head. But you even get a little Sgt Pepper-ish list of all the people that are in the band there. And yeah, it's all rather good. Yeah, Carrie Booth, sorry, she was the keyboard player with them there. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the Frankie one, because obviously some stuff's going to be repeated, you know, letters and things. But we'll have a quick little flick through here, and I always like looking at the sort of the news section to sort of see what's happening. I guess what could have concerned me at the time would have been the Thompson Twins were nearly killed while filming the You Take Me Up video. The blasting went wrong and I've had to run for it. I've got bruises all over my legs, muttered Alana Curry. Well, there you go. It's dangerous being a pop star. And here's the thing, the feature about Frankie Goes to Hollywood, which is titled, "They've become the most notorious British group since the Sex Pistols. Now they're dressing up in army uniforms to promote their new single, A Song About Peace. Neil Tennant presents." So Neil Tennant did the interview with Frankie, which is, you know, pretty interesting really, when you think in 2 years' time Neil Tennant will then be the person that's on the cover of Smash Hits, because the Pet Shop Boys have had their first #1. However, if you take time to read the interview, it's actually a well-written, well-constructed interview, and they're kind of talking about the banning of Relax. There's talking about where the band are today, whether they've left Liverpool or not, and you know, a few other interesting things and a bit of background about Holly and the other band members when they were in previous bands. So yeah, it's a good little interview. Now, the album reviews definitely have a much more alternative flavour for the most part. We've got OMD's Junk Culture at 7 out of 10. They don't like Tony Basil's album, but Echo and the Bunnymen get 8 out of 10. Dead or Alive get 2 out of 10. Well, there you go. But surprisingly, Spear of Destiny only get 5 out of 10. And The Cure get 8 out of 10. And Tons on Tail, which is a spin-off of Bauhaus, they get 5 out of 10. So, you know, quite interesting. Although, why the Fraggles of Fraggle Rock got 6.5 out of 10 when Spear only got 5, who knows. Now, it's interesting that Dave Garn of Depeche Mode has reviewed the singles, and he obviously loves the Cocteau Twins, but it's interesting just to see what he says about other people that's kind of in his genres. Let's look at New Order. This one's a grower for sure. I've played it a few times and it gets better, so he obviously likes the New Order one. The Human League, pretty heavy subject, rousing chorus and the snappy guitar riff. Going to be a big hit. Now, Fad Gadget were obviously a band that they were on the same label with, Mute. And it's about time Fad Gadget had a huge hit. So obviously he's very loyal to his mates. What do you think about Sandy Shaw? I prefer this to the original by the Smiths. Her voice adds a new appeal to the song. I bought the first 2 Smith singles, but was later rather put off by Morrissey's obnoxious and narrow-minded attitude towards other songwriters. Well, some things just haven't changed, have they? What do you think about Gene Loves Jezebel? The rhythm is my favourite thing here. It glides along and is great of ease and helped by a vocal effect probably supplied by the emulator. The acoustic guitar and marimbas work well. You see, being a musician, he's kind of going into detail about how the records are recorded. Now, would you get that now if, say, a more contemporary artist of now would be making a review? And I'm not sure. But he even sort of approves of Roland Rat, saying, you know, you've got to have a sense of humour. Now, we do like consumer electronics on this channel, and it's quite interesting to see what Dixons were advertising. And they're doing a personal stereo here for $12.99. And this is pretty much identical to the same one that I had at the time, made by WH Smiths, which I actually still have to this day. But also you've got just a pocket radio with a pair of headphones for $10.99. There's a Sanyo cassette player here, which also I think I have in my collection. If not, I have one very similar, and that's also $19.99. And yeah, so this is the WH Smiths one that was about the same price. I think this was $12.99 around 1984. And this one works great, and it really does have very good sound reproduction. And the Sanyo, which is, you know, pretty much similar, it just has separate left and right volume controls. That's this one, I think. If it's not this one, then it's very similar to this one. And again, you know, this is a nice little simple, you know, it's only got fast forward play and stop eject, but you know, it's a good little personal cassette player. Now, when it came to Record Mirror this month, you had a Thomas Dolby cover, you had Jerry Dammers, and you had Captain Sensible. So a much different style from the spectrum of music over at the Record Mirror. Now, I just want to quickly look at the album charts around this month. I've just taken the middle of April's copy of Record Mirror, and you can see Now 2 is at number 1, Lionel Richie's Can't Slow Down is at number 2, Into the Gap, Thompson Twins number 3, Thriller number 4, Humans Lib, Howard Jones number 5, Alchemy by Dire Straits number 6, Innocent Man by Billy Joel 7. Then we've got Lament by Ultravox, Cafe Blue by the Style Council, Colour by Numbers by Culture Club, The Smiths' debut, The Works by Queen, Marvin Gaye's Greatest Hits. Again, that was a compilation that came out because he'd only, you know, recently passed away. But even then, you've got 15 really big albums there already. Then you've got Joe Jackson's Body and Soul, Sparkling in the Rain, Simple Minds, Touched by the Eurythmics, Off the Wall by Michael Jackson, U2's Under a Blood Red Sky. So we're getting sort of older albums that are still selling well. I mean, Paul Young's No Parley is still at number 22. The Now One, the first Now album's at 23. Fugazi by Meridian's dropped a bit to 24. But even if we go right to the sort of bottom of the album charts, we're we can kind of see that we've got Synchronicity by the Police, Three of a Perfect Pair by King Crimson, which they're about to go on tour doing that, and their other 80s albums. Essential Jean-Michel Jarre, which was a big selling compilation. It did get up to number 3 in the charts, but that was 72. And number 74 in the album charts is Pipes of Peace by Paul McCartney. And so then we go right down to the bottom. What was number 100? The Atlantic Years by Roxy Music, 1973 to 1980. So that's a 4-year-old album, but it's still in the album charts. As is The Cure's Japanese Whispers, which came out in 83. I think that's at 99. What else have we got? The Flashdance soundtrack, the George Benson collection, that just come out. That ended up selling quite well. I remember seeing that everywhere at the time. I mean, even War by U2 was still in the album charts at number 81. Billy Bragg's Life's a Riot was behind them at 82, so that didn't stay at the top forever. But, you know, lots of really big albums were in the album charts at the time. Now, here's the thing. Here's an advert for the Thompson Twins You Take Me Up special edition 12-inch remix, which I have here. Now, at the time, I did not ever remember this coming out. And I actually bought my copy of this probably 6 or 8 months later, second-hand, in a second-hand record shop in Bournemouth. And it just goes to show the lengths that record companies went to get a hit. There was already a regular 12-inch single, but they brought out another one because you could bring out as many as you like, and they would get into the charts. It says there, watch the Tube this Friday for the premiere of the video, which I would no doubt have seen at the time. Now, I was going to mention kind of what was on TV, and there wasn't a lot on, because as I said, things like Worcester Test, Oxford Road Show, they were having a break for a few months. Top of the Pops obviously had all the hits of the day, and the Tube had a couple of episodes before they went on their break as well. And so on the Tube on April the 6th, you had a live performance from Propaganda and from Joe Jackson, and you had some stuff from Paul Young as well at the Hammersmith Odeon and The Cure, so not a bad episode there. I'm thinking if it's The Cure one, it's probably when they did The Top, Banana Fish Bones, and they did another song as well. I can't remember, maybe it was Shake Dog Shake, can't remember, but that's quite a well-known performance. And then on the last episode of this current series, you got Grandmaster Flash doing a live set, you had the Kane Gang doing a live set, an interview with Kirk Brandon, Tracy Young does a live performance, and yeah, so not bad, a little bit of telly on there. So yeah, it's not as detailed a rundown as I'd like to have done this month, but I did have to get this video out now. And I think I've kind of summed up roughly what was happening on this month. But next month, I think we can safely say there's going to be a fair few big numbers and hits that will have been released next month. So hopefully I'll get that episode out a bit quicker than I did this one. But anyway, thanks for watching.